Hello and welcome. I am Ashwini Gupta, Deputy Editor at ThePrint, and today we have with us a very special guest, Dr. R.Balasubramaniam, Member, Capacity Building Commission. Dr. Balasubramaniam's latest book, Power Within, The Leadership Legacy of Narendra Modi, will hit the stand soon. Dr. Balasubramaniam wears many hats. He is a qualified doctor, a former Rhodes Professor at Cornell University. He has worked in the development sector, worked and lived with tribal and forest communities in Mysore for many decades, and now he is into improving governance in India. Welcome to ThePrint, sir.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So the very first question, very obvious question, what made you write a book on the leadership legacy of Prime Minister Naraendra Modi?
When you work with indigenous communities, when you work with people on the ground, you realize that policy making is such a critical component of the state's administration and its processes. And people who lead this are people who really matter. And I was always be conflicted asking myself, why can't people understand what people want? And that led me to get into leadership in a deep way. So my research, my education, my studies at Harvard and other places led me to understand leadership better. And what I was really disturbed is most people analyze and write about and talk about leadership from a very Western-centric lens, to the point where people think leadership has come from the West. Mm-hmm. So when I dived into Indian scriptural wisdom, into Indic knowledge, I realized that we have had incidents of leadership explained in our history, in our Itihasa, in our Puranas, in our folk tales, in Panchatantra even, and we don't even celebrate it. So I started doing a lot of research into it, and when I understood that there's so much that the situation, Indic wisdom contributes to it, I thought what I was discovering, no one person could actually fit into all that I'm describing. I wrote another earlier book called Leadership Lessons for Daily Living.
You have written 3 books earlier.
I've actually written, this is my 9th book.
Oh, this is a 9th
both in Kannada and English put together.
Okay.
In English, it's my 5th book. And so I was looking at it and I understood that, there is something which possibly one man cannot embody. And one of my guides and mentors in the Ramakrishna mission, he told me that I don't know much about all this, but my brother monks tell me that there is a chief minister of Gujarat who possibly is embodying a lot of what you're saying. And I thought, I can't reach up to him, I don't know him, I may not be able to do much. That was many, many years ago.
Oh, so you've been planning to write a book on leadership from that?
From that long, but not having the opportunity to understand and see an exemplar, I just gave it up. But coming to Government of India 3 years ago, reporting to the Prime Minister and his HR Council gave me an opportunity to watch him from close quarters, talking to a lot of people working with him, gave me access to information. Then I thought, here is an exemplar whom I can use to explain all the Indic principles that I was discovering. And that's what led to this book. It's a 2-year work, a lot of research, 50 years of his life has been researched. His decision-making patterns have been observed. And after that, the book has come out.
What, according to you, are the 5 leadership qualities that set Narendra Modi apart from his predecessors and contemporary public leaders?
See, if you look around the world, there are very few leaders who are stuck to what I would call the crucible moment, which leads to forming a purpose in life. All of us go through a lot of crucible moments and we keep shifting purposes. Now, he, for the last 5 decades, had a single-minded pursuit of saying that I have to serve. And expanding that idea of seva has been happening throughout his 50 years. It could be service in a very narrow construct of being a pracharak, or wherever he was assigned to work, or service to a state in terms of Gujarat, or expanded version of service in terms of the Prime Minister for the country, and now expanding it further. So I think this not giving up on his purpose, despite all the challenges he's faced, is the first quality I would say. The second, from public leadership angle, Chanakya writes in Arthashastra so beautifully. He says it's 3 critical things he says. He says the primary responsibility of a ruler is to make sure that it leads to, when you're ruling a country, in this context, the Raj, he says it should lead to Lokasangraha and Yogakshema. And if a ruler in the Indic thinking, which means the welfare of citizens and as well as protecting what the citizens have secured and ensuring security for citizens of every kind. But he says to do this, it can only happen when the ruler has got Indriya Nigraha, the control of his senses. And I find him a classical expression of this. So to me, he's an ideal public leader the way Chanakya describes. The third quality I would also say is his enormous ability to communicate. Now, Bharata in his Natya Shastra, Bharata Muni writes about Sadharanikaran, or a simplification of communication in a very literal sense, but it's actually a beautiful way of describing it, and it's been done thousands of years ago. Where two qualities he talks about. One quality he talks about is sahridayata, where the bhav or the emotions gets communicated in a way of an experience of oneness with the other. And if you look at the Prime Minister able to connect, whether it is connecting with global leaders or connecting with man on the street or connecting with bureaucrats, his ability to connect immediately is mainly because of the sahridayata. And sahridayata, Bharata describes, is the one which can lead to sahakaryata, where working together. And the collaborative way he can inspire people is also coming from that. The next extraordinary quality of public leaders are, very few leaders in the world today actually can balance short-termism with long-termism. And, electoral demands, you have to think of short-term. But he can talk of what he can do tomorrow. He can talk of giving rice free to 80% of the population, or insurance for 50% of the population, health insurance for 50% of the population, as much as he can talk of Amrit Kal and Vikasit Bharat for 25 years and this long-term vision. Very few leaders in the world, no leader in the world has even had a strategic vision for his country for 25 years. The last point I would like to make is he actually deeply believes in the principles of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and what can we give. Expanding our work beyond India's borders, which he has done so beautifully, is something which he has done. And he's taken this to the extent where in the Delhi Declaration, he said the 4 Ps matter. If the world has to sustain and survive. So it is a very global context. It describes people, profits, the planet, and peace. And I think that's what all of us require anyway. So this ability to transcend borders and to provide an opportunity for the world to actually look at something important is something I would credit him with.
In fact, sir, I wanted to ask this question that, in this book, you have very generously used Sanskrit and Indic terms while trying to capture Modi's leadership legacy. So what made you examine Modi's leadership approach through this prism of, ancient Indian civilization?
See, one is his own view that leadership is not something that has to be a Western package product. And, people like Narendra Modi or several leaders in our country not necessarily means that they have to go abroad to get an education, despite India's fascination with the world outside India in education, or to understand leadership from Western lens. Even if you include a person like me, with such a strong foundational rooting in grassroots wisdom, I think I also thought that leadership understanding can come only when I go to Harvard. So I also did the same thing. I took the same path. But here I was watching him, and when I see it, I realized that his knowledge, and if you look at his life, he's virtually led a life of self-inquiry throughout what I have seen in 50 years of his research, constantly seeking knowledge. And I realized that darshana, where you try to travel around but reflect and go deep dive into, travel within yourself also. It's something remarkable about him. And there's no other way I could explain it. Western literature can only take you this much. So what I've tried to do in this book is analyze it through different interpretations I could make from the Upanishads, from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Arthashastra, from different works of different people, including Mahabharata and Ramayana. And necessarily the best way to explain it is using the Sanskrit word. But in the book, I don't use the original diacritic. I just try to make sure that it's the popular way it's being spoken about and written about. But I've given a very detailed glossary and explanation of terms where for the serious-minded reader. Now, you should understand this book is very academic. So it's got a huge chunk of it is my research notes. A huge chunk is a glossary with explanation. So for the purist, there's a lot of that. End of the day, it's also an interpretation. Our Shastras can be interpreted by different people different ways. You would see it in a different lens. I would see it in a different lens. I have seen it through the prism of leadership. And therefore, I have to necessarily explain it using that. As much as I've done that, I've also tried to validate wherever I could find current leadership literature research with the Western lens. So you'll find a lot of Western references also.
Yeah. In fact, in the last chapter, you have talked about the Western leaders and then talked about Narendra Modi.
I've tried to sort of, I'm not really comparing him with anybody else. He's unique in his own way. But what I've tried to say is there are great leaders in every country. And there are great moments for every country when the leadership decisions actually alters their history. And that's what is the moment for Narendra Modi and for India today. I say Abraham Lincoln, with his ideas, in his own way, shifted the thinking of their country from looking at equality in a very serious way, fraternity in a serious way. It was very difficult times. He had to take the country through a civil war and manage it and still hold on to his values. It was a watershed moment for them. compare them with Lee Kuan Yew, where for Singapore, it was a watershed moment. Singapore is what it is today for the foundations he did that day. I don't compare him with Narendra Modi or anybody else. I only say that he was critical for their history at that point of time. Deng Xiaoping similarly for China. But they were all in one context. If they were to live their lives today in their own countries, I don't think what they did at that time would solve the situation today. The speciality of Narendra Modi is an extraordinary learner. He's like a sponge absorbing knowledge. I would really call him a lifelong learner. Every moment of time, every opportunity, he learns and absorbs. And so he can respond to the context more rapidly than others. And so in the context India is today, the cultural appropriateness that India demands of its leaders today, he fits the bill perfectly. And this is the watershed moment both for the country, for all of us, and for him too in his leadership. And that's how I talk about him in that particular context.
Dr. Balu, you have a very interesting and varied, career experience. You are a qualified doctor, like I mentioned earlier. You then went on to study governance at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and then you came back to work with tribal communities, forest and tribal communities. In fact, you lived and worked there for decades in Mysuru. And now you have decided now you are entering governance, to improve the quality of governance in India. So what made you take this shift, and how has the experience been like?
It's been a fascinating life journey for me. And like you said, I always believed that there's so much of community wisdom in our country. And I didn't go to Harvard and then go to tribal India. I actually went to tribal India and finding the problems that I was seeing there, finding the challenges for policy making, that I thought, why can't people understand what citizens want? And you're making policies which are so disconnected from the citizens in the grassroots. That agitation in me led me to sit on satyagrahas, protest. I've had a very fun-filled journey, getting beaten up, all that I have had. The state doesn't like.
So when did your association with the tribals begin?
40 years ago.
Okay.
So it was as a young student, I started this organization, the Vivekananda Youth Movement, inspired by him. Then immediately on graduation, went there, lived with them, amongst them, liked them for 25, 26 years. And I realized that I have so many questions in my mind, I don't think I have answers. So search for answers led me to acquire more degrees, public health. Then I did my MPhil. Every time I would think I found the answers, it was not there. So I thought I'll go to Harvard, the mecca of education for public policy at that time, specialized in leadership. Came back, then I realized that they may not help me get me answers, but they help me frame my questions better. And when I started framing it better, I discovered a lot of answers are within me, around me. And so my greatest learning is from the communities. If you see my earlier book, Voices from the Grassroots, I talk about community wisdom. And then I thought, what is wrong in the system? It could be possibly an ability to be relating to communities at the ground level. And so I started getting deep into citizen-centric governance. So my book, I the Citizen, is all about how the citizens participate and be partners. And when the Prime Minister gave a call for Jan Bhagidari, it was music to my ears, because this is what I dedicated my life towards. And here is a man who actually believes in it. The power asymmetries, the information asymmetries between the state and citizen is so wide. When the head of government says, I want to reduce it, and when I had the opportunity to join as a member of the Human Resources in the Capacity Building Commission, where our mandate is to make governance citizen-centric. So this was the best opportunity I could have aspired
for. How did you get into Capacity Building Commission?
I don't know. You should ask the Prime Minister that.
From the forest and tribal communities?
I think he has this unique knack of picking people from around the country. And how he does it, I don't know. Though I have asked him, how does he select people in the book? I write about how he selects. But when I was offered this, I thought this is an opportunity which is what I'm competent at, what I specialized in, what I understand, and what I know from a citizen's perspective. So if the government wants this voice to be embedded in the way we run a country, there's no greater joy than that. So I don't know, maybe I do know that my earlier books he's had access to. So whether it is a result of he reading that, or whether it is how did he decide to pick on me, I think only he could answer that question.
So the Capacity Building Commission, where you are a member HR, it was constituted by the government in 2021 with the mandate to hone the competencies of civil servants in India and, improve the efficiency of governance. So what has been the progress so far?
I think we have done a lot. 3 years ago when we started, we weren't sure whether we'll be able to achieve it. The cabinet order setting us up is so exhaustive in its wisdom. to make us do what we have to do. I think it is born out of the Prime Minister's experience as Chief Minister of Gujarat, where he had a similar mission Karma Yogi there. And he realized that if you really want the state to deliver and respond to citizens' needs, you need an institutional framework. So the difference between there and here is he set up the institutional framework. And the mission Karma Yogi as a concept is a very well-structured organization, and the heart and soul of it is Capacity Building Commission. Our job is several things. In three major responsibilities in the way in his language, I'm using the Prime Minister's language here, is he said, first is how do you get Karmachari Bhav se Karma Yogi Bhav aana chahiye. The Seva Bhav should manifest as a Karma Yogi. So how do you think and operate like a Karma Yogi? Which is a huge demand, and it's not easy in a public, even working as a public servant is great. If you're a Karmachari itself is good enough, but how do you transcend the limitation of feeling like a salaried employee to saying that I'm serving the nation? The second mandate he gave us was people think in rules. He doesn't say, he says, how do you transcend the context of rules? Use the rules to serve citizens. So your role is to build a great nation. Your role is to serve citizens. So shifting from a rule-based approach to a role-based approach. And the third mandate he said is, today black swan events are the norm. COVID gave us that example. The wars are today. Every day it's a new challenge for the country, and anywhere in the world, anything happening impacts any country. So he said, how do you be future ready? So Capacity Building Commission's mandate is to keep the civil servants future ready, which means they have to engage in lifelong learning. You can't imagine what the future is, and therefore you give the ability to keep learning to the civil servants. And that's what we have been doing. And so I think we've come a long way. On the supply side, we are trying to oversee all the training institutions of India, from the Labasnas to the police academies to all the institutions, help them become better at what they do, deliver an accountable training product. Earlier, why are they training? Whom are they training? How do you know they're training? Whether training is resulting in competency acquisition? All of those questions have been asked. The demand side, we work with the ministries and say how aligned are they with the national aspirations. It could be a $5 trillion economy. It could be Atmanirbhar, citizen-centric governance. Filter across that and map every individual who's contributing to it and say, to do your job, what are the competencies you need? We have designed what is called the Karma Yogi competency model, which is a very unique public HR competency model. And I'm proud to say that this will possibly be a global benchmark. And we map them against that and say, to acquire these competencies, what is that you have today? What is the gaps? And therefore, how do you get it from our own Karma Yogi Bharat? I got the digital platform that is there. So around 1,000 courses are there. We're keeping on increasing it every day. So acquiring those competencies. So Capacity Building Commission is not a training commission. It's not just looking at this training. We look at state capacity, which means institutional memory, policies, programs that the state is doing, and how they're able to deliver on it. Like governance itself is an example.
It's kind of a paradigm shift in.
It's a major paradigm shift in a very gentle way. Because I think it's reimagining public HR. And a lot of countries have tried this in bits and pieces. The most comprehensive public HR change process, and I would say, is India. And in 3 to 5 years, the citizen will start feeling the impact. Because these are very slow generational shifts. It's not like you press a button and tomorrow morning everything has changed. It's not something, it won't sound disruptive, but in my opinion, it will truly disrupt and lead towards this whole of government approach. It will lead towards less government, more governance. And it lead to a situation where citizens truly feel they're partners in building this nation.
But sir, do you think that, Indian bureaucracy needs an overhaul? Do you think that, in this age of super speciality, can we afford to have bureaucrats who are mere generalists?
I think this distinction between generalists and specialists is rapidly fading. If you even look at the system, I wouldn't call the word overhaul, I would say evolution. Because we need to evolve based on the context of the times. If you look at India when we got our freedom and 2% GDP of the world share of GDP, necessarily we inherited the legacy of the colonization and their bureaucracy. And there the bureaucracy was trained for being just collectors, tax collectors and maintaining law and order. They were not trained to run a country and looking at citizens as citizens. They were looking at citizens as subjects. But they were a provider nation. So they had to learn the tools to provide optimally. 90s when India globalized, liberalized, deregulated, suddenly from regulating for nearly 40, 50 years, they had to now say, no, we are deregulating. And nobody trained them. To be fair to the bureaucrats, they learned it themselves. So when the shoe pinches, they had to learn something. So at that time, we became a provisioning nation and they had to learn it. Today, the Prime Minister has given a call for partnership. So preparing people for partnership is not easy, where we saying that we see each other as equal. And this shift is the evolution I'm talking about. And eventually, it will reach a point where the distinction between what is public, what is private is all becoming hazy after COVID. So the unification of Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar and delivering to the growth of a nation is rapidly falling in place. Facilitating that would be the state's role. Facilitating progress and not taking personal responsibility, saying, I will do all India's development. I think getting us to work together, which means you need a generalist up to a particular point to understand, to set the process. Maybe the model which will emerge could be specializing based on the needs. Now, the government of India is also working on lateral entries, where the specialists come in laterally, stay for 3 to 5 years.
Do you think it's a good idea in the long run?
Personally, I would say every country needs it. And because you cannot get market skills, because the situation is so dynamic and so rapidly evolving, by the time a government servant is trained in that, the dynamic ecosystem has already changed. So the best way to fulfill it would be getting lateral entrance or specialized in it. Today it could be drone technology, it could be AI and ML, it could be the way the private market is able to rapidly generate that kind of manpower. That nimbleness till the state acquires, this is a good option. Look at UK, from whom we inherited the civil service. 33% of civil servants in the United Kingdom are part-time. Every country is looking at lateral entry, lateral exit. They're looking at specialists, and that's the best way to absorb. And even maybe youngsters today don't want a career in government. They want to contribute and work in government. They come for 3 to 5 years. They shift jobs in the private sector every 2-3 years.
But sir, this 3 to 5 years, like even in lateral entrance, they have a time frame of 5 years. I mean, that kind of.
They come in for 3 years first, and then they could get if they're performing well, they could get a 2-year extension.
So, I mean, isn't it too short a period to make a difference?
I don't think so. If you're only looking for market-related skills, they're not replacing the system. They are only complementing the system. We should be very, very clear on this. I don't think lateral entry is a replacement for civil service. It can never replace. I think whatever anybody says, any country, not just India, you need a core competence of public administration. Only the state can provide. So let's not have second thought about it. But the state's delivery mechanisms are evolving so rapidly, for which you need special market skills. And till the state internalizes it, you need. And you don't need to internalize it because those are altering so rapidly. And that's where you need the lateral entrant. I personally believe a 3 to 5 year is an excellent framework to borrow skills from outside. I work with a lot of young people in my office. I'm sure they all would like to leave their jobs in 3 years. They bring a lot of skills. They bring a lot of understanding that way we can deploy it. Just because they're 25 years old doesn't mean that they don't carry skills. It's how can I optimally use them? I don't have to invest on learning this. I could. But I'll be spending the next 5 years learning all that. When I can get it in 5 minutes, why would I invest 5 years? I think that's a thinking in government too, because we need the citizens, their aspirations are growing today. They need responses immediately. And the state doesn't have time for that. We have to
can't have the old way of
working and doing. And so you need the freshness of idea, freshness of thought. And it's a two-way process. As much as they learn about government, I think government will also learn how to operate it faster and better. I think efficiency is coming in. The Capacity Building Commission is essentially looking at 4 things. How do you enhance performance? How do you ensure accountability? These are very standard paradigms. You can always ask me, aren't they supposed to have been there? Because it was not strong enough, we are doing it now. We are strengthening it. Third is how do you make governance citizen-centric? And so we are very, very clear. How do you prepare them for the future? So we measure and map ourselves. So performance is getting mapped.
But sir, I mean, was a kind of feedback because Indian bureaucracy is known to be very reluctant to change.
This is a stereotype image even I had before I came into government. To be fair, as an outsider, I thought government is mediocre, government is expensive, government doesn't carry talent. Look at UPSC, the toughest exam in the world. The best of our Indians get into it, youngsters. Now, we should find a way to keep them energized and motivated throughout their careers, because the barriers to staying motivated are also plenty, and that's our job. From the commission, how to minimize it. So I also change my opinion. We are not as expensive as we thought. We work under tremendous constraints. We have to also see the silver lining, because we are all trained to see the dark cloud so much that we miss the silver lining. A lot of extremely well-performing officers who are quietly doing their job. They may not be the flashy social media kind, telling you every morning what they did and getting claps for that, but they quietly do their jobs. So I believe the hunger to change, the hunger to do better, hunger to serve, I am an optimist. I'm convinced that it is a majority of them want to do that. You provide them the motivation. I call it the MMO framework. You ensure that they have the means to perform, and you give them the toolkit and the necessary facilities and the opportunity. I think our system will deliver. So it's been 3 years I've been inside government now, and I'm actually happy to be surprised that they all want to absorb. So my experience till now has been enormously positive. There'll always be black sheep. There'll always be people who don't want to change, but Why focus on the 30% who's reticent and doubtful and skeptical? Why don't you focus on 70% and celebrate that? So my approach always has been, keep expanding the 70%, it will replace the 30% soon.
So, how is the Capacity Building Commission going about improving performances? If you can,
See, we have defined performance. For example, I'm a physician. Now you come into my clinic and you say I'm having fever, I won't accept your word. Right? I would put a thermometer into your mouth. And after I check it, if it's 100 degrees, I would say you have a fever. That is because somebody over time has done research to say 98.6 is normal temperature. Anything below, we say hypothermia, anything above, hyperthermia. Now, the government never had a performance normative definition at all. What does performance mean for a civil servant? Today it's been defined. How do you know you're performing? We've got measurement yardsticks. How are you individual level? How are you performing as a division, like within a ministry or a department? And how does the government function? Now, I think pretty soon the government will possibly put it out in the public domain, the report of the commission, where we've defined all this, we've defined how to measure it, and we're actually doing it. Now we're developing instruments. I'm sure the DOPT has been working quietly now, and once it's all cleared by government, whether it's performance appraisals, whether it's connecting performance to postings and promotions, a lot of interesting changes are in the air. My guess is the next 5 years, we'll see a lot of these governance support. I call them scaffolding for governance. You need measurement of performance. You need definitely, this is all scaffolding. So I wouldn't call them reforms. This should have been there for 75 years. Nobody paid attention to it. Now somebody's paying attention to it. So scaffolding is provided. Governance will change. And this will take some time to institutionalize, but I'm pretty confident. I may not be in the government after 5 years or 3 years, whatever it is, but I'm pretty sure the benefits of it I'll enjoy.
Very interesting times. So, how do you see this trend of, bureaucrats coming to social media using Twitter, tweeting, posting tweets on the social media platform? How do you see it?
See, on one side, we want evolution of bureaucrats. We want bureaucrats to change with times. And when they do the tweeting, etc., so I would say that's the generation today. I don't do much, but working with young people, they're teaching me how to do it. Right? And the necessity of the times. If the book has to be known, I have to be on social media. That's the reality of the times. Now, but should I do false tweeting? Should I simply claim things, aggrandize myself? That is not a bureaucratic DNA.
Yeah, but many of the tweets you see is about, some
themselves.
Bureaucrat, about themselves, what they have done.
I think soon the government should bring out a policy for social media. I would recommend that, because end of the day, the bureaucracy is supposed to be anonymous, insulated from all the political ideologies around them, insulated from aggrandizement, be the unseen, unheard, powerful force that they should be. Now, if that is changing, that's something which may not be good for governance, because governance is a system and we are all faceless transactors in that system. And so eventually maybe DOPT should seriously look at how do we regulate it, not regulate it, at least encourage people to use it in a constructive way. You can popularize government programs, you can popularize the benefits of governance, you can popularize access to information, you can say this is how you come and reach me or complain to me or give me a grievance. Like the MyGov is a powerful social media platform that we have, or a virtual platform we have to give opinions on. CP Grams is a very powerful platform of government to register your grievances. So we should possibly use it in a constructive way. Like it's like, as a professor, I know when I teach, my students are always on Facebook or Twitter or something, and I'm not good at it. And one of my students told me, Professor, why don't you give your assignment on Facebook to us? I didn't know how to do it. That's the reality, right? It's easy for me to put it on canvas and say, go see it. So I think somewhere, use it in a constructive, positive way. Use it as an opportunity for governance betterment and not for personal aggrandizement. That would be my view. That's my personal view, but that's how I would see it.
You have now been with the Capacity Building Commission for 3 years. How would you rate Indian civil servants? You are a professor, you taught leadership in global schools. So, from your experience, how would you rate Indian civil servants?
I think I would put it this way. Now, in a scale of 1 to 10, unless you compare it to other nations, you can't really know where we stand. No, it's like running a race without anybody else in the race. So it looks like you're running a very good race. So to be honest, a lot of countries are attempted changes. Let me give an example of the United States. When Bill Clinton was the president, he actually appointed his vice president, Al Gore, to head a group called Reinvention of Government. And then they made it into Performance Act, where they brought in a lot to say performance should be measured and all that. Despite that, friends and analysts and researchers, colleagues of mine in different institutions looking at the US thing, appreciate that really nothing much has changed. See, finally, until you bring in citizen-centric accountability frameworks where citizens feel empowered enough to demand, It's an ecosystem change. Governance does not change only by just the government changing. Citizens also have to change to demand from the system to respond to their needs. So I think that has not happened in an ecosystem approach in India. So if today if different parts of the system are differential levels. So I would say the first 10 years of a career of a civil servant, when he has to be extremely operational, he's just moving from closer to the 10th year, he's moving towards a tactical role. They are very good sometimes, and they are very good in delivering. And quickly, if you don't train them, that part of your life is over. That's where the generalist phase that you're talking about. Now, if you have to go deeper, you have to become strategic in your thinking. So tactical to strategic. Only now we are thinking like that and training them. So operational, that's why we run the best elections in the world. Isn't that a feather in our cap? We can take care of the world's largest public distribution system. We provide the highest midday meals anywhere in the world to children. We don't see all that as a bureaucratic output, right? We just see that's normal for us. We distribute pensions. Our digital public infrastructure that has been set up and rolled out is an envy of countries, including OECD and global north countries, right? So we know that the system is capable because it's extremely good at the granular detail. What people miss is somebody conceived DPI. Or when the Prime Minister conceived it, somebody supported him in deconstructing it. So there is a tactical force behind it. There I would rate them differently. Strategically, now they're forced to think strategically. I would rate them differently. So operationally might be a higher grade. Tactically, I would lower the grade. Strategically, I would still lower it. So now that also gives me a blueprint for capacity building commission. As much as I appreciate operational and make sure it's at that level, I have to enhance the tactical capabilities, possibly rapidly, and because the world is changing rapidly. We will look climate mitigation and climate agriculture mechanisms are different from the standard green revolution we had, right? And you're looking at milk revolution today, or looking at poultry or animal husbandry, etc. It's very different. Immunizing a million cows across the country were very good, but what could be the potential disaster for animal husbandry in this country? Thinking that through and saying, preparing ourselves for 5 years later, we need a little more strength. So I would rate them differently there.
So that's where different competencies come into play.
Exactly. And that's exactly why the role of capacity building commission is so critical. To constantly map the competencies required, which are very dynamic and fluctuant, and ensure there's a provider for that. And you don't know, because we are now discovering domain experts are not as much as we thought they were. Right? Today, if you're looking at disaster resilient agriculture, we are not finding too many in the world because people are struggling to discover it. If you're looking at CRISPR technology, that's so embedded in a few countries that if you want to initiate it, it's a challenge. Now, if you're talking about quantum computing or semiconductors, we are now on that path. We'll soon get into it. If you're talking about, suddenly the Prime Minister is given a call for blue economy, green economy, and the space economy. So it takes time to mature. If our strategic thinking had been very good 15 years ago, that wouldn't have taken so much time. That's the point I'm trying to make.
With this, we come to the end of this interview. Thank you, Dr. Balasubramaniam, for joining us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.